Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Matt Chat, brought to you by USA Wrestling, the national governing body for wrestling in the United States, and by Nike Wrestling. Go to athleteps.com for all of your Nike and USA Wrestling branded gear. Really excited to be joined by the brain trust of the men's USA Wrestling team, James Green, Joe Russell, Bill Zadick. Gentlemen, thank you guys so much. I didn't know if I was going to get one, two, or three of you, so I hit the jackpot today. Thank you guys for coming on with me.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Dave.
For sure. So I ran into, I think, each of you out at the U.S. Open, and I'm going to jump around. Let's start at the U.S. Open was structured differently this year. It feels maybe the simplest way to say it, there's less steps in the process to make the world team. The medalists were the same, that they got to sit till Final X, but now the U.S. Open winner in those medalist weights was the Final X opponent, and then the weight classes in men's freestyle specifically, which I think was only three of them, correct me if I'm wrong, but 61, 92, and 125, because Jaden turned down 92. That one, the winner of that tournament became the initial Final X person or opponent, and then the other one will be determined out there in Colorado Springs in a few weeks. So as a fan, I think we saw a lot more high-level matches where, like, before the U.S. Open, a group of people could sit out, and there's world team trials, last chance was worked in there, all that stuff. So as you guys that deal with the end product of it, but get input from coaches and athletes all over the country, so you're looking at it through a completely different lens than we are. What were your thoughts on the U.S. Open?
Yeah, well, first off, it was really exciting, great wrestling in all styles. But specifically for men's freestyle, we felt like, or I felt like it was really good, really fun to watch. A lot of high level matchups, and the matches themselves lived up to the billing of the match up. And yeah, I mean, you kind of hit the nail on the head. We took a lot of input from RTCs and clubs and athletes and coaches. That we have a lot of events on our schedule, and it's our process. We always want our process to refine whoever comes through. We want to be inclusive. We want opportunity for the best athletes to be able to identify themselves and make their way through that process. And you also want the process to refine them, so that we know, having come through this field in this process, they're going to be well prepared to represent themselves, their families, their RTCs, and ultimately the U.S. team at the World Championships or Olympic Games. So you're always tweaking things, but taking some input, trying to streamline that process, and maybe have a few less calendar dates, as well as the financial burden of that presents. And of course, it made the U.S. Open a lot more important. And there's a lot to that. I'm sure we'll get into some details with that. But my personal feelings were exciting on a lot of levels that we can talk about. So,
well, obviously we're on USA Wrestling Airwaves, but I tell people, if you're a wrestling fan, that's the coolest meet of the year to go to. To me, it's cooler than the NCAAs. There's way more top level men and women, 3 different styles. You go across that other hallway, and there's another 16 mats of age group hammers that will eventually probably you guys will be coaching, or maybe even down the line doing your guys' job. And it's also so much more accessible. Like I walked around with a friend of mine, and like in a couple hours bumped into guys like yourselves, Sergey Beloglazov, John Smith, Kendall Cross. And if you're a fan of wrestling, and I think we saw that in the men's finals this year. I mean, like, Joe, you've been doing this a long time. That was last year. I watched the semis with the 3 of you, which was freaking awesome. The finals this year, the arena was dang near capacity. What do you think it was the result of having the new process where more people came, or what do you think was the catalyst for that?
I just think there's a lot more on the line. So, everybody had to be there, and the fans knew it. So I think they showed up to watch it because they knew, if you don't win this tournament, you're not advancing on the Final X. So I think that made a big difference. For me, like you, it's like going to a family reunion. It's like you grew up seeing your whole life and getting to see them again. And so just walking around the arena, it was a lot of fun. The back room was pretty chaotic. There's so many mats going, so many people in the back, and that atmosphere was even fun. Not necessarily on the main stage, but in the back room, watching age group people and just like I said, like a family reunion. But so much on the line, I think that got people excited to come and watch, and for the athletes, I think that makes it more fun as well.
Yeah, and I'm trying to come up with the simplest way to say it. Maybe the simplest way to say it is whoever won the U.S. Open was in Final X for sure, and then they either wrestled somebody that was sitting or the winner of the World Team Trial mini tournament in a couple weeks. So maybe that's the simplest way to say it. James is the person that's kind of gone through this process the most recently. I remember you were kind enough to jump on with me probably about 12 minutes after you got officially hired, which was, a couple years ago. So you've gone through this process as an athlete. 70 kgs was you're basically the house of green for a lot of years. When you watch this process now, do you think you would have liked it better, worse? You just adapt because that's what champions do, or what are your thoughts on it?
I guess I like the importance of it, and I would have liked it like that on one end, looking at it. But then when I do look back, the U.S. Open it hasn't really ever been kind to me. But I think with a little bit, if I knew that level of importance going into it, I would have been well prepared. So, and you get to see these guys know that they can go here, put it all on the line, and either they're gonna get to that final X or that's it. As opposed to some people going to competition. Well, I'm already going to trials. I'm just trying to get a better position at trials for after this. So I feel like the energy was high across the whole board, and you don't have guys forfeiting out on the backside. So it was really good.
Yeah, but again, and USA Wrestling doesn't pay me to say this. If you're a fan, and this tournament in this format won't happen until 25 because 24 is the Olympic trial, so it's separate from everything else. There'll be, I'm guessing, some version of a U.S. Nationals like there was the last time in December of this year. Last year, 4 years ago, was in Texas, I believe. So I'm guessing some version of that. But in 25, honestly, people should figure out a way to get there. It's like, and tickets are way cheaper than NCAAs too. So, and there's always hotels, and you can always get a meal. So those are two other differences from NCAAs. So you just came back from Pan Am's, and I saw some crazy statistic, like the scores were like 330 something in favor versus 30 some odd points for the opponents. And, the vast, overwhelming number of gold medals. So obviously, the broad statements to say that America in all three styles is just better than everybody else. There's times when you want to wrestle people that if you don't wrestle great, you're going to lose. And there's times it's good to just go out and thump some people. So how do you guys, as the people, and whoever wants to answer this, I guess I'll start with you, Bill. I mean, this is obviously part of the process to get all six weights qualified and ideally go get 6 Olympic gold medals, in 24. How are you happy with the quality of competition at the tournament and how our athletes competed?
Yeah, we were happy. Not only with the medals and the achievement, but when you're in a performance position, you're always evaluating proficiency. And so what we saw our athletes doing in their matches, the skills they're using, the tactical adjustments they're making, I think we are encouraged by the progress that's being made, and so it's important. And as we just finished talking about the U.S. Open and the energy around that, I think not to go backwards, but a little bit, it's a springboard, right? You have the significance of what the U.S. Open is, and so everybody competing there gears up, and you can see the reflection of that in the competition. But then the guys who might be sitting out, they're paying attention too, and it's raising their level. And we were able to, catch a small glimpse of that at the Pan Ams, and both of those groups are using those competitions to springboard into our trials in 10 days or 12 or so days, and then into Final X. So I think it builds a really good momentum for our program in all three styles. Anytime you step foot on a mat and Pan Am Championships, it's a protected competition. You're officially representing the United States. That's a big thing, and we have an opportunity to continue to build on traditions of great teams, from decades before us, and that's both an honor and an opportunity. And so I think our guys and gals represented that very well. And now with the ranking structure as it is, there's ranking points on the Continental, which, the better we can position ourselves to win medals this year at the World Championships, rolls over into the Olympic year. And so there's a lot, right? I think our system's getting healthier and better. It's more objectivity and incentive to perform at a high level. And I think the athletes are responding in all over the world. I mean, not just, hopefully we continue to respond well to those, but you see a lot of competition from South American countries, and they're coming up and in all three disciplines. And so, it's a good start. A lot of work throughout the rest of the summer and World Championship cycle, but we feel good about our start.
So to kind of explain, you touched on a bunch of things, but one of the things you talked about was the importance of seeding criteria. And we have people that are immersed in freestyle and Greco wrestling and some people that don't really watch it at all. So when I say this, I know I don't know it as well as you guys, but I'm going to set the table and let you guys correct me. Basically, for a long time, it was a complete blind draw, supposedly. Maybe like the World Cup of Soccer or some, the pool of death and those sort of things. And then it was an unbalanced bracket too, where like, to explain to people, like in America, there's 24 athletes in a bracket. There's 6 in each quarter pool. And back then it was 8 on one side and 16 on the other side. And so they've gone from that to seeding 2 to seeding 4 and creating balanced brackets. Is it up to 8 now? Is that correct?
Yeah, last year and now again this year at the World Championships, they will seed 8. And and then the ranking. I don't know if you're going to continue and talk about the whole ranking point structure, but
no, go ahead. You guys know it better than I do, so go ahead.
Yeah, so the ranking points. There's a series of tournaments. There are 4 ranking tournaments throughout the year. There is the World Championships and or the Olympic Games, and then there are the Continental Championships. So you have the Pan Americans, the Europeans, Asians, and Africa Oceanias. So like a Class A competition is the World Championships, Olympic Games. So the highest points are earned at those events, placing, 1 through, I think, 10. And then the Continentals are a level B competition. They have the next most points. And then the ranking series events that they have 4 during a World Championship year. So, this year we've had 2 of those events already. One was in Croatia in the beginning of February. Second one was in Egypt in 3rd week of February. We've now had all of the Continentals. So Asians, Europeans, Africa, Oceanias were in March and April, and now the Pan Ams were the last one. There are 2 more ranking events, one the 1st week of June, one the 2nd week of July. And then the accumulation of those points will set the stage for the World Championships in Serbia in September.
And just to clarify, like if James is accumulating points, James is accumulating points. If then for some reason he doesn't go at 70 and we'll say I lose a lot of weight and now I'm the guy going at 70, I don't get his points, where
Right.
that's
Correct.
different than the Olympic trial process, where if James qualifies the weight and then somebody else beats that person in our Olympic trials, they get the spot, like what happened with, say, Daniel Dennis and Tony Ramos, right?
Yeah. I think that was a little bit confusing though. Like it's really the same process, whether you have the points or not. You can be the number one ranked guy in the world by the ranking points, and if you don't win your country's trials,
you
don't go.
Yeah.
And if you win the trials, you go, regardless if you have 1 point or all the points or no points.
And there are some countries that spend a lot more time trying to accumulate these points. So it doesn't automatically separate, like, say at 86 kilos, like if David Taylor and Yazdani Tarati, they might not get the number 1 and 2 most points. So somebody else could go to every single thing, get the most points, and then those guys could be 2 and 3 and be on the same side. Okay.
Correct. And that's a great example, because I believe David, even though he's the returning world champ, which has the most points, and it gives him that advantage, that incentive-based reward. I think right now he's third on the ranking points, because he didn't wrestle the Continental. He hasn't hit a ranking event yet, and some others that placed high at the Worlds have hit those markers, and so. But what it does is essentially it separates the better competitors, and it kind of diversifies the bracket, so you don't have those quarter brackets of death, as you suggested. We've seen those throughout the years.
Well, I don't know if there's any of this in wrestling, but like you'd see massive suspicions of corruption, like when the World Cup soccer pools are drawn, and like they don't seed it, at least my understanding, and then it's like you could have the 1, 2, 3, and 5 in a pool, and then 28, 29, 30, and 32 in a pool. So one of the things Joe was kind enough to invite me to sit upstairs with you guys last year during the semis, and probably honestly my favorite 2 hours of that weekend, just letting, I guess, frankly, just being a pest and asking you guys.
Anytime you get to sit next to Joe Russell, that's a good time, because he's a good dude. And
to tell the story.
That's why I sit next to him, because I'm hoping that some of it's going to rub off on me. It just I must have Teflon on me, because it's not sticking so far.
Well, I was talking to Joe on the floor, and I was with my friend Matt Collum, who actually, shout out to Matt, just won his Masters age group out there in Vegas. And Joe goes, well, I'm going to go up and watch the semis with Bill and James. And I was teasing him. I'm like, nice name drop, dude. Thanks for leaving us here. And he goes, you can come up and watch. I go, seriously? He goes, yeah. So I say, I'm going up. Collum didn't think I was serious until we were actually up sitting there watching with you guys. One of the many things that I enjoyed talking to you guys about, well, 2 of them. One was like specific tendencies, and not about like how one American would beat another American, but like, for example, you guys got in a little bit like some of the ways you would try to attack Asaj Aliyev or something like that. I want to get to there, but the other thing were rules, and the rules interpretations and how to be prepared for that. So I talked to a couple referees, and this one caution one thing, and James, I saw your tweet about it, and for what it's worth, I agree with you, but this one caution one thing is being emphasized. So I'll start with you, James. Like, you go ahead and state your position on how you feel about it, and then knowing how you feel about it may not be how the world feels about it. How are you going to coach to maximize, to optimize performance, knowing that rule set?
Well, yeah, so the whole thing I tweeted, like, it's like you kind of get penalized for defending. And a couple of examples, like if you get taken down and you're, defending the gut, and as we teach the gut, you want to walk the, roll the lock and slide forward. And if that's happening and you go out of bounds, at least what we were seeing at the open, or I was, especially across age level stuff, is that you're getting hit with the guy just got a takedown, and you're getting hit with a caution and one, and then getting put back down. So it's like you get penalized for defending or not trying to stay in and let a guy turn you, or vice versa. You're on your feet, you're defending the takedown instead of staying in and trying to defend that way. It's like, even if the guy, sometimes guy picks your leg up and walks you out, if you're not making an attempt to circle in, even though, right, why are you going to circle in when this guy wants to take you down and get two? You're going to get that caution in one. So first and foremost, I say, well, we don't want to be there anyway, right? You want to be in good position wrestling. So if you're in this position, I tell the younger guys, when you're on the edge, you got to just make an attempt, right? You got to wrestle. Sometimes we get caught up too, where you have younger athletes, well, they'll let the guy just walk them out, and then you're definitely getting hit with the caution one because you didn't even wrestle. So I just try to convey that message of always wrestling the position, especially on our feet, if we're on parterre, we definitely have to be aware of where that guy is driving. So, because sometimes you see an athlete on top and they're not necessarily trying to turn you, but they're just hoping they get that caution one by running you, with their gut, running their legs forward. So you just have to make that emphasis to turn your hips and try and circle back in. So, I mean, that's pretty much it. I just don't like how it was interpreted when I was seeing at the Open. And then overseas, we're always going to not get the calls. So that's just what we always say. We have to wrestle our opponent in the rush. So.
Well, I mean, you said the point that every coach says, like, look, don't be there, just don't get in bad positions. But when and I know you guys know this better than I do, but when you're wrestling the best guys or girls in the world, they're good too. And you're not going to beat everybody 10-0. You're going to beat these kind of matches. So, like, Joe, one of the matches I think that was, I don't know if it was controversial, but it was certainly well watched and well discussed, was the Diamond Guilford Adeline Gray match, where Guilford was up 8-0 for people that didn't see it, and Adeline gets 3 1-caution ones and wins the match while she's still losing on the scoreboard. And I don't, both those athletes have been nothing but kind to me. So I didn't care who won, but I was more interested in the process of that. When you see something like that, Joe, is it just you point out to the athletes you're coaching, look, you got to find a way to get back to the middle? If you're coaching her, is it better for her to actually like drop to her knees and take a bad shot and give up 2 when she has 2 cautions than to give up the 3rd one? Like, what are the lessons that can be taught there?
Yeah, I think, that was a real tough situation for her. And I think going back, I think she would have handled it differently, maybe fought harder to stay in or taken a bigger risk defensively. So the refs weren't, the caution one wasn't easy for them to give, making it a little bit harder there. So it's a lot of it is, you got to see how the refs are interpreting the rules at the event, or, at the Pan Ams. For us, it was good to see internationally what they're looking at right now, if anything's changed or anything like that. But as an athlete, you got to adapt to that, especially after the first one, after the second one, definitely before the third one, right? You change your tactics quite a bit to avoid that getting disqualified in that situation. But it's a tough one. Both great athletes, both have a ton of respect for both of them.
Sure.
And it's I guess a painful lesson to learn.
Well, certainly probably something she'll never forget. The other match, just because I have a relationship with the kid and the coaches, the Lillidow Jory Volk match, the under 20s at 57 kilos. Cornell Robinson wrestled for us in Merrimack, St. Louis guy. I know he's heavily involved with USA Wrestling at the age group level. Like, there was this stoppage with like 8-10 seconds left, and Lillidow was up 6, but he had 2 cautions. And like I told Cornell, I'm like, you're better off getting taken down and gut wrenched than going backwards out of bounds, because you can lose 2-2 and still win the match. And if you go out, when you guys, like, I know all these athletes, like James, you're the one that wrestled most recently. Like, you're at the Nebraska RTC or wherever you're wrestling, and you've got the Mark Mannings and Brian Snyders and those guys of the world talking to you. Then when you go to like the USA Wrestling camp, and I don't know, Bill or whoever wants to answer this, are you guys literally saying to them, be aware of these scenarios? I'm sure your coaches talk to you about that, but in this scenario, you guys need to have a game plan because we can't let them steal it from us. Is that a conversation that gets had?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, a lot of, as you're kind of alluding to, is there are real strategic and tactical implications to rules, right? And the edge of the mat is obviously an accountability. The middle of the mat is another accountability, right? The penalty period or the shot clock, we, colloquial terminology, but yeah, those are important things. I mean, to kind of steal some terminology from gymnastics, in our world, we talk about compulsory positions, right? Like in a flow routine, you have to have these skills in your flow routine. Well, the compulsories for us are just what you're discussing, right? We know we've got to be proficient on the edge of the mat. When you get into that zone, you got to know how to get your butt to the center, and that starts before the zone, or however you choose to address that within your style. We know because of the center of the mat, the shot clock, even if you're a no-tie type wrestler, you got to deal with your opponent's pressure. If they're coming and they want to get hands on you and take ground from you, are you going to use movement? You're going to use elevation change, fakes, whatever it is, and those are the must-haves. If you're going to be competitive on the international level, parterre defense, it's a must-have. Hand fighting, hand control ties, those are must-haves. And so, that's a lot of what our job is paying attention to those things and in constructing, building a program that addresses them so our athletes have a chance to develop their skills and comfortability so they know how they're going to wrestle. It's not really a script. It's more just being confident in your skills in that scenario so that your own instincts take over when they're presented.
So, James, you're working with the developmental guys probably more on a daily basis. I know you guys are a team and everybody's kind of helping with everything, but when you're talking, I guess, to summarize what Bill said, there's these core areas, compulsory, whatever you want to say it, and these athletes are efficient or deficient, and certainly the older you get, the more likely you are to be efficient. When you're holding training camps for U17s, U15s, U20s, whatever the case may be, it's more about spending time in these compulsory positions, correct? Like, and situations than, coaching a bunch of guys one-on-one, or how are you guys kind of trying to add the right salt and pepper to the meals that these guys are trying to be?
So for our developmental camps, a lot of times, especially since we have folk style, the kids are coming here and they're coming off of that, whether they're going to the open or junior duels before Fargo. So just kind of hitting those key pieces. And I always like to start on just that positioning of edge of the mat because, right, in folk style, now you just go out, there's no point, there's no, caution. So we always want to emphasize, well, we have to know where we're going to go when we get to the edge, how we're going to score off this, how we're going to defend it. So I always like to kind of start in that area and then work my way to our actual center of the mat wrestling. And then even with those younger athletes, because it's usually, from the fall to early spring, they're folk style, and then just a quick turnaround to freestyle. So to hit those key rules and make sure they're in tune with the scoring, how to, think about a match. They're up by one, down by one, criteria, what they need, what's considered one, we how to start if you get put in a caution, back down in the middle. A lot of athletes don't know that. So always trying to refresh their minds with that. And then, we watch a lot of video on the current senior levels, what's happening at the top, because, right, if it's happening at the top, it's got to be starting at the youth level. So we kind of try and take a little bit of information from that, not just our current USA wrestlers, but from athletes across the world. So a lot of video review technique and points of emphasis as far as positional wrestling and a lot of different countries that we'll see coming up at these next World Championships.
Yeah, so that brings up something interesting. Like, I was lucky enough to be on the play-by-play for the Olympic trials in 21, which are obviously technically the 20 Olympics, and spoke to Danny Blackshear, who's one of the best officials in the world. He was kind enough to give me like an hour, and he gave me a lot of great insight on things. But one of the things he talked about, frankly, was like brick strategy from an official's point of view. And so, Joe, like, one of the things he said to me was, you should probably not throw the brick if the camera is at the same angle that 2 of the 3 referees are in, because if they're against you, because they're not going to change their mind if the angle's the same thing they saw. So do you guys as a staff have like a brick strategy conversation? Like the other example that I can think of is like when Joe Colon wrestles Seth Gross, I'm probably not throwing a brick in the first period almost either way, because they're going to score 30 points. And if you lose your brick, which actually happened in one of those matches, there might be something later where you really need it. So what are you guys doing? Because you're obviously at the highest level. What sort of teaching or concepts do you guys do about brick strategy?
We spend time speaking with the top officials and trying to learn from them and kind of see what they're hearing and seeing from UWW. We also get the officials to interact with our athletes like at camp. So if our guys have questions, officials can do a little talk to them. We can ask the questions and try and get insight from them at that point as well. So we do involve the officials with our national team because we think it's important. At the World Championships itself, the brick is very important when you throw it, when you don't throw it, and trying to come up with a plan of attack, talk about it ahead of time. Typically, we try and have the second chair person kind of be the more level-headed person if possible, to let the guy in the corner itself, be the guy out there fighting for their guy and doing all that stuff, and trying to be the guy behind watching for those things a little more, what did the ref see? What maybe didn't they see? Maybe take a peek over at the mat chairman and see if he's giving you the clue if you should challenge or not, that kind of stuff. Just kind of watching body language and trying to see those things as well. But you got to be real careful, throwing the brick way early when it's a 1-point difference. Maybe hold it at that point because you may need it for a bigger call later. Or if it's a match changer, maybe I got to use it early. But it's tough, right? And you want to make the right call and make the right decision. So we do talk about it quite a bit and try and make sure when we're making that risk that we're taking a calculated risk with the brick.
You mentioned that last year, and I'm so happy you brought it up, that in the front and I'm in the back, that that should be part of my assignment. One, to make sure that the score on the board is right. If there's an underline, almost writing down the score so you know who's actually winning, and then giving input hey, don't throw the brick. I don't think you're going to win it. Or you do. It's almost like having somebody upstairs in football, they're seeing the review before the head coach does and tell them whether to throw the little red flag or not. So one not serious question at all. What's your guys' favorite brick? Is it the Angry Bird? Is it the dice? What's your guys' favorite version of the brick that you guys have had?
I like the Angry Bird. I like it anytime we go somewhere and they're having fun with our sport, right? They have the mascot. I know just in Argentina they had little Sonic the Hedgehog deals. In Rio, the Rio games, they had the little mascot for the games in the corresponding colors for the corners. I think that's fun, right? Now, the last this quad, the entire quad, they've had the button, right? So you just hit the button in your corner. It's maybe not quite as fun from an amusement standpoint, both for the coaches, but maybe for the fans too. You got coach exerting, letting off a little steam and how he's throwing that challenge, right?
The button. Go ahead.
Funny at the Pan Ams, we had a situation where fans never were yelling at us to throw the challenge, to challenge it, and we were deciding whether to challenge or not. And Don Bradley, he was the wrestler and he was the level-headed one. Looked at us and says, "Don't worry about challenging." So we didn't. So still, the athletes are the ones that oftentimes are the smartest of the whole bunch out there. They understand the situation a lot better than the coaches and everybody around there. So it was good that Dom shook us off, and then he went ahead and teched the guy. So it worked out well.
Well, that reminds me of the 2016 trials when Pico was losing 8 or 9 to nothing, and something happened and his corner wanted to throw the brick and he waved it off. And I think he was wrestling Ness. You guys would probably remember better than me, but came all the way back and followed him the other way. And if he lost the challenge, he'd been out of the tournament. The button thing is, I'll just say this very quickly, reminds me of my father when I finally got him off a flip phone to a regular phone, a smartphone. He hated it because he's like, I can't just hang up now. Now I just got to do this. So
That's right.
the release of frustration, I think, is a valid point. So I'm very, very interested in your guys' opinion on this because you guys are all super successful wrestlers, both in folk style and in freestyle. In women's wrestling, girls wrestling, it depends what age. Now college is freestyle. So the transition from folk to free stops at 18. Excuse me, where now in college it's like 23. And you see athletes that come right off, like the most recent one I think of, like at the Olympic trials, is like Jaden came right out of college, made the team. If it was, and Gary Abbott was on weighing in a couple of weeks ago. He filled in for Grant, and awesome to be on the air with the GOAT. And he's obviously super pro freestyle and would want it to be that all the way through. Rather than, maybe if you guys want to say what you prefer, that's fine. But what are the advantages? Are there any advantages of our men's college being folk style? And JG, since you wrestled most recently, I'll start with you.
So just from using my own career, freestyle helped benefit my college wrestling from a mat control positioning and even how I thought about getting to my offense and finishing where I wanted to be. And I was in a spot where I wrestled Derek St. John a lot. So and the Iowa guys. So wrestling freestyle, I just remember 2013, it was my first university team, but through that summer, through that process, being at the training center, going wrestling overseas, and then coming back and going into that next year, I was just able to hand fight so much better just because I knew that I'm how to control the center, how to not just kind of walk backwards and give up ground. And I don't think that even after that, that's when I first beat St. John and was able to manage those positions and win a lot of wrestling matches easier, or be more efficient, I should say, as opposed to before I started getting serious into my freestyle. So that's just my opinion. And I honestly, as I was training, I didn't mind doing folk style training because I thought it helped with my conditioning. I just didn't do any mat wrestling. That's something I've never went back to.
Joe and Bill, what do you guys think? James is saying that the freestyle helped his folk style. Do you feel like the folk style helps these guys at all in freestyle, like the grind of it? Like we saw a couple of the guys like Aaron Brooks and those guys that just came through a college season and they're winning the second period in almost all these matches because of that grind. And obviously this is a separate subject, but it feels like mat wrestling in folk style is more helpful in MMA than freestyle because the person's not trying to get up. So Bill or Joe, what are your guys' thoughts on that?
I got a lot of thoughts, but I've let
Go ahead.
first.
Go ahead.
No, I think folk style helps a ton. I was going to bring up an example of James Green, one of his last tournaments. He was wrestling an Iranian and got him in a cross wrist tilt. Iranian had no clue how to defend it. I know James got that from folk style and just rolled that guy up. So it was a lot of fun to see. And you see that with David Taylor in his cradles and top positions or armbar halves that these foreigners haven't felt before that folk style brings over. But I do agree that the NCAA season is so hard, such a grind, and the 7-minute match, having to get away from bottom, that's hard work. And I think when you go through that American system, it really has raised the level of toughness in our wrestlers when we get them in the freestyle scene. So there's crossover between the sports for sure, and our styles. I guess it's all wrestling, but whether you're doing Greco, freestyle, folk style, there's a lot of crossover that can really help you in any style you're in. So there's a lot of benefits to folk style for sure. And the Iranian learned it the hard way when he wrestled James, so that was kind of fun to watch.
Yeah, Bill, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think we all know that the grind that folk style is, and just a lot of emotional things you learn besides the skill and the cardiovascular development. It's interesting historically, up until I would say 2 quads ago, the American medalists were guys that made their first team right out of college, and they made team and won a medal that first year. And then beyond that, it was harder. And I think a lot of that was that folk style grind was elevating their performance. But there's a lot of skill development on the freestyle side too. You know, there's a lot of technical things like James said. And so I was blessed to be coached by a lot of great coaches. My father, Denny Campbell, Jabby Young, Mark Sprague, Floyd Vaughn, and obviously Coach Gable and the national coaches. And they were always, all of them shared a unique mind that it was wrestling is wrestling. And you learn and you adapt in the broader skill base that we have and the more opportunity we've created for ourselves. And so, yeah, I mean, we're proud of our folk style system in the United States, and we know where it enhances us. And I think certainly freestyle enhances folk style too. And there's statistics on both sides of that. You know, when I look at this year's NCAA championship, I think we had 16 of the 20 finalists had been on age group world teams. 18 of 20 have been involved in freestyle at a high level, meaning national team members, et cetera, et cetera. And that's pretty consistent from year to year. And, you know, when I was a developmental coach, I started tracking that stuff, and we watch it every year. And I think that is pretty evident of your highest performers.
Yeah, and for sure. I mean, like, I remember Coach told me one time, like, the single tournament for the biggest predictor of success in college is like the Fargo Freestyle Finals juniors, you know, and maybe it's changed now that, you know, there's these other tournaments, because I know some kids are skipping those for world teams, but this was like 10 years ago. And I would guess that was probably right at the time. You mentioned a statement that I think most really smart people, men and women, say about wrestling is wrestling. So that leads to an interesting topic, and I've gotten better at these interviews, not having like 19 specific questions asked and just hitting topics, but new rules in college. So the new rules feel way more freestyle-y, if that's a word. If not, I'm going to coin it. So, you know, where there's no at my age, anything hip is a bonus. So, but, you know, like no point for the riding time without a turn, 3 points for the takedown. Like, I always tell people watching, or even like the guys I'm coaching, like, to catch up in freestyle is so different. Like, if you're losing 8-2 in folk style, it's cut them 8-4 or 8-4, cut them 9-4, you know, and then your takedowns are only worth 1 basically till the last one. Where in freestyle, you take them down. You can do like what Gable Stevenson did at the end of the Olympics and get 2 in 9 seconds and make up 4 points. You can't do that in folk style. So do you guys think the rules will help if they pass? Because obviously at this point, they're just suggestions. Do you like them? Do you think they would help you guys? Whoever wants to go first.
We don't want to influence. We want to influence the direction they're going.
No, you know, it's interesting because, I mean, yeah, we know a takedown is one of the hardest skills to perform in our sport, right? Doesn't matter if it's folk style or freestyle or Greco or whatever, to you know, battle with somebody and put them down and be in an advantage position is a difficult skill. And so it's, you know, I think you want to reward that and incentivize that. But there's rules that, you know, I don't know how it's going to change things. And you kind of got to give it some time and think it through, because, you know, as the way I see it, if a really good offensive guy, he's going to go out and try and score all the 3-pointers that he can. But if you're better than me and I'm apprehensive of you, then I'm going to start staying away. And so will it cause me to stall? Will it slow down matches? Because I'm afraid of your offense, and 2, I'm afraid to take risk and make a mistake because now I'm giving up 3 points. And so that would be a concern of mine. You know, and to kind of give a real world example on our side of the coin is when the edge of the mat rule came about. As a wrestling purist, I didn't love that idea. I'm like, oh, they're just going to give a guy a point for pushing you out of bounds. But what I learned in a very short amount of time is that athletes they're really talented and they're really smart and they adapt quickly.
Yeah.
And what happened is, in about a 4-year period, the average points being scored in a match by a push out dropped from almost 2 points to less than 1 point. And so what happens is the matches happen a lot faster because people are wrestling back into the center. There's less stoppages. There's not as great a need for cautions by officials in the subjectivity of the way you call it, and I call it differently. And so it's pretty straightforward and simple, right? It's real easy for the average fan to, and the non-wrestling person to come in and understand it. Well,
yeah,
you're better than me. I have no business being over on that edge. And if you run me out of bounds, then shame on me. And it's very easy for them to understand. It's very objective. And so that has kind of turned my thinking around in how you make rules. And so I think with these new proposals, I think there's some really good ideas and thoughts behind them. And I'll be really curious to see how, if they pass and how they, how they influence the actual activity inside that circle.
Well, first of all, Bill, that's why you're one of the greats, because in all the examples, you made me better than you, which is so smart for the audience and also highly unrealistic in wrestling. But I'll take it. And then the second thing is I'm also thinking about that rule with no riding time. Like if you're riding the crud out of me and I can just sort of stall down there and not get turned, are they going to have the guts to call stalling on the person on bottom? If they kind of like fake like they're coming up, almost everybody's just cradles and cross wrist tilts these days. So like if they're just clearing hands and whatever else. I mean, I remember when the shot clock first came out, and like if I got put on the shot clock, like I was taking dumb shots and doing all these risks, and now people realize like let it go. As long as you work hard, you're going to get your shot clock back on the other side. Like you said, everybody adapts so quickly. It's really smart. So it'll be. Do you think that you guys think the rules will pass? The suggestions?
I don't know. I don't know if I've had enough conversations to see what people are thinking and how they're influencing, their administrators and people that are voting on that in the committee. But I think everybody's curious, and I think it's good conversation regardless. But I like the idea of us trying to move our sport forward and positively incentivize action and creativity and innovation. I think that's where freestyle, when we were getting threatened to be removed from the Olympics, and it really was a wake-up call, and we made some really positive rule changes. And since 2013, I would say the rules, we can always improve and get better on some small interpretations, but in a general sense, best rule structure we've had in 30 or more years. There's a lot of action. There's a lot of points on the board. It's really fun and exciting to watch. And as we started the call with the talk of the U.S. Open, I think that's great evidence of that. And so, I don't mind, making suggestions to try to improve the thing and capitalize on what we know our sport offers. We have this great product, and we want to put the best version of it out there.
Yeah, it's awesome. Like you're saying. So, I mean, Bill, you're sort of the CEO of the Brain Trust over there. So how often do you engage with like James or Joe? And if you're looking at like when Final X is done, okay, and now you know who your team is, how much, like I'll just pick the lowest weight and the guy who's sitting, say Thomas Gilman makes the team. Obviously, he's got his crew out at Nittany Lion Wrestling Club. But how much do you guys as a whole break down Thomas's film, and video, whatever you want to call it, and then say, hey, here's where we think he could get better, and maybe make suggestions to Nittany Lion or to Thomas? And how much do you break down the film of his most likely opponents and make suggestions?
Yeah, well, calling me the brain trust is a real misnomer. That's why I have Joe and James, and I'm the guy usually screwing everything up, and these two guys keep me on a straight and narrow. I'm just kind of wandering between the two guardrails. But yeah, I mean, the collaboration between us, our national staff, and our athletes and personal coaches is really important. And I think, you know, I can go back and reiterate everything you just said, but I think you outlined it pretty successfully, pretty well. And yeah, that's a big part of what we do is we're watching what's going on in the world and what our opponents, what we're going to face, and helping to maximize our athletes' opportunity to exploit their liabilities and maximize their assets. And so yeah, a lot. That's the job.
So one of the, like I told you, a friend of mine who wrestled in college but didn't wrestle at this level went with me and was watching the finals with me. And, you know, he kind of asked me what my prediction was for each match. And the one I remember I got right for sure was 61, where I said, I think Vito's going to get a takedown and lace him 4 times. And he's so good in that position. And James is a guy that was incredibly creative and efficient in a leg lace. To me, that seems like the one position where, like, you could be losing by 8 points in freestyle, and if you get it and you can keep that guy in the middle, not only can you make up 8 points, you can make up another 10 and get him out of there. I remember one time I had to coach a guy against Vito, and I'm like, I know this sounds crazy, but get to the edge and wrestle, because even if you get taken down, it's only 2, it's not 10. And so when we won, Bill, I threw 4 bricks. I won 4 bricks in that match. So
Yeah.
So, but when you guys look at a skill like that, and he's like, you guys know better than me. If he's not world class, he's at least national class with that lace. Do you guys, you know, break down the little nuances of what somebody like him is doing? Do you help teach that to the age group kids, to the national level kids? Because it seems like it's death for a lot of people if he gets on top of you. Like, and when he's taking kids down or guys down, he's falling. I shouldn't say falling. He's transitioning right into that, it seems like, most of the time. So, James, I'll ask you because you were really good at that. And I remember we actually had a conversation about your match with Ashnall. So, yeah, do you watch somebody like that since you were so good at it? Or, what's your guys'
I think what happens a lot of times is, especially at this age level, or at the age level group, which I was really surprised at, is that wrestling is so much more accessible that they're kind of watching it on their own. So what's really unique about the training center is, and again, I bring up last year, is because our camps kind of always run into each other, or they like overlap. So while I'll have the U17 or U20 guys here, the seniors, they might just be finishing up a camp, or they might be starting a camp. So a lot of times these kids are, they might go up to a Vito and say, hey, I know that you do this. Can you show me? Or they go up to Seth, like, you're good at this position. Can you show me? Because really, when we come to camp, as we mentioned before, we're kind of looking at the world as a whole and trying to set up our athletes to be them best selves. So we're not really hitting an individual with technique more so than just saying, hey, this is where we need to be good at. If someone has an underhook on us, or you want to get to your ties, you need to do this. So a lot of times, let's just say practices 9 to 10. Well, after 10 o'clock hits, you have guys that stay after, and they're saying, hey, I want to work this, or I want to focus on this leg lace. So, because some people are good at guts, and if you looking back at the matches, or Dake, a lot of Dake's taking guys down. He's not necessarily leg lacing people. He's doing gut wrenches. So you have guys where Dake, Snyder working on guts, as opposed to Vito or myself working on leg lace, or you're working on the edge of the mat, gut defense. So it's really up to the individual, and I think that's the unique part about the training center, is when you get great minds that are thinking in the same direction. You can definitely elevate yourself and those around you. So I think we see more of the individual wanting to be their best selves than the kids who they look up to. their favorite wrestler. They want to be just like them, whether they're learning from or they're just saying, hey, can you hit your leg lace on me? And I just want to feel your leg lace, and that'll make their day. So, yeah, USA Wrestling limited overall.
And just to piggyback, I think in a general sense, that's it's summarizing what our whole developmental philosophy is. Some of which is just driving best practices down to, earlier and earlier, investing earlier in kids' careers so they're more successful, healthier, safer for a longer period, and have better success, but also better enjoyment in that process. And so a skill that's great on the Olympic or world championship level doesn't mean it's not too advanced or too complex for these kids. And so whether it's skills or tactics or training methodology or whatever it is, philosophy. Yeah.
Well, it seems like there's a ton of collaboration there, not only between you guys, but then like the athletes at the senior level. I've talked to some guys, like they learn from each other. And then like you're saying, the collaboration spills down where like if I'm a U20 guy and then, you guys are, bringing your guy, the guys or girls in, I can at least sit on the wall and watch and almost do osmosis, get better. And again, if those guys are my heroes, and then sometimes if they stay afterwards, you can learn from them. I mean, I was not nearly as high a technique, but when I was in 7th grade, I got to hang out with my dad's college team. And those are like some of the best memories I have in wrestling, just because they were nice to me. And, they give you confidence in life, and you're learning, even if you don't know you're learning. So,
yeah, I think that's just a tested and true model, right? It's on a senior level, it's a model that was pioneered by, basically Gary Kurtelmeyer and Dan Gable with the Hawkeye Wrestling Club in the 70s. And it's whether you call it the local sports club or now we call it an RTC, it's the same model that we see working all across the country, right? In high school rooms, college rooms, you have the older athlete who's mentoring the younger athlete, not only communicating, but also just by the living, breathing example. If I want to see how things are done, I can look over there and there's Jaden Cox when he was living here, or James Green, or Kyle Snyder, or Dake, or whomever. And that's what it looks like, right? Oh, this guy, you mean he shows up to practice on time? Not only is he on time, but he's there 30 minutes early. When he's done with practice, he's working on some skills. He's grabs a young guy and he plays with something to help himself and help this little kid. He takes care of his body. He eats right in the cafeteria. He's on time for appointments over here. All those things are important, and just consistency from top to bottom.
Yeah, it's the thought that hit me as you were talking is when I transitioned from track wrestling to USA Wrestling, I was proud, frankly, just to be able to say, like, I'm on the airwaves of USA Wrestling. Like, when you grow up, like if your goal is to be an Olympian or a world champion, which all of our goals are, you guys are still helping people that to say USA Wrestling. So if you're a patriot, you love the country, you're going to say you're proud of USA Wrestling no matter what. But we all love to support a winner. And how well the men's and women's freestyle teams, your staff, what Coach Steiner and that crew is doing over there consistently, like 4th in the world is something you guys are upset about. 3rd in the world is something you guys are upset about. Like, it's awesome to, me play the minorest of roles with USA Wrestling. And it's like I said, like last year watching, the US Open with you guys was, super cool. I tell people, if I don't know anything about wrestling, it's my fault, because I get to talk to the smartest people in the world every week. So, if I can't pick up something, then it's definitely lost on me. So I just want to thank you guys so much for your hour, especially, Bill, you rounding up all of the guys together. It means a lot to me. I know a ton of coaches watch this and they share it with their athletes. So you guys did something really special today. I just want to thank you guys.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Dave. Appreciate what you're doing.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for watching and listening. We'll see you all next week.